Full Employment and Price Stability by Warren Mosler. Exogenous Pricing, a Base Case of Monopoly. The current monetary system is a classic monopoly with the traditional analysis of monopoly sufficient to describe all aspects. The government is the monopoly issuer of the dollars needed by the private sector to pay taxes. Spending by the Treasury and spending by the Fed when it performs offsetting open market operations, as well as direct lending by the Fed, supply the private sector with the needed dollars. In all cases, the private sector exchanges assets, goods, or services to the government, the monopoly supplier, in exchange for dollars ultimately needed for payment of taxes. The government has the same pricing options with its money of any monopoly supplier of an absolute necessity. An analogy can be drawn, for example, with an electric utility monopoly, although taxes give the currency monopolist a tool to regulate demand that the electric utility monopolist does not have. How does the monopolist price his product? There are two options. Number one, set price P and let quantity Q float. Or, number two, set quantity and let price float. The first option is generally preferred, with a gold standard or the proposed employer of last resort program, two examples of using the first option. However, the government is currently employing the second option. It sets a budget and determines quantity, spending, and lets the market determine price, the price level, as all purchases are made at market prices. If the monopolist decides to set quantity and let the market decide price, it must constrain quantity so that demand exceeds quantity, or, for all practical purposes, the price of its product will fall towards zero. Government constraint of quantity to control price means using continuous unemployment and excess capacity to maintain price stability. Surely, this would never be considered a viable option in running an electric utility monopoly, for example. A gold standard uses the monopolist alternative of setting price, in this case the price of gold, and letting Q, quantity, the quantity of government spending and lending, float. Taxes create demand for the currency. The government sets a price at which it will buy and sell gold, and makes all other purchases at market prices. It is then fiscally and monetarily constrained to a policy that spends little enough on non-gold items and adjusts interest rates to maintain a desired buffer stock of gold. The government must limit its non-gold spending to less than the demand for the currency created by taxation, so the excess demand for the currency is evidenced by gold sales to the government. Excessive non-gold spending results in gold sales to the private sector. As long as the buffer stock and legal convertibility are in place, the price of gold set by the government is the currency's value. All other prices float at market levels and reflect nominal value relative to the set price of gold. Microeconomic theory details the logic, which concludes that a monopolist controlling an absolute necessity sets price one way or another. The employer of last resort proposal uses the option of setting one price, the employer of last resort wage, paying market prices for other purchases, and letting the total quantity of government spending be market determined. With a gold standard, gold can always be considered fully employed, as gold can always be sold to the government at the fixed price. Likewise, with an employer of last resort policy, labor can always find a buyer.